as we're letting folks join, as always on these calls, if it's your first call, we'd love to hear from you throughout the call. You can communicate with us via the chat box, and there's also a button that allows you to ask questions. It looks like it says Q&A at the base of your navigation bar. And if you ask questions using that Q&A button, it builds a list that we'll be able to keep ordered and mark off as we answer. So the best place to ask a question is that Q&A box, and the best place to sort of weigh in or share a thought with us is the chat box. And while we're waiting for people to get settled, please feel free to just say where you're calling from. And if you know what office you're thinking about running for, or you're already running for an office, let us know what office you're considering. And I will go ahead and start us off by saying, I'm Rob, and I am calling tonight from my home in Windham, Maine. So just go ahead and drop that in the chat. And we will take about 2 minutes or so just to give everybody a chance to get on the call. The weather here in Maine is supposed to be a high of 9 degrees this weekend. I see Seattle, Washington, Fergus, Minnesota, running for school board. I see my fellow Mainer, Derek. Joseph in Bowie, Maryland. Excellent. We've got Bergen County, New Jersey. Peoria, Illinois. Augusta, Georgia. We got an Augusta up here in Maine as well. Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Ooh, we got someone from South Florida as well. Good chunk of folks from Illinois. We've got Mike from Philadelphia and Scranton, PA. Bethel, Alaska. Thanks for joining us from Alaska. Denver, we've got Iowa, and I see we've got Colorado, Massachusetts, Florida. So we've got a really good cross section of the U.S. So thank you guys for joining us tonight. I'm going to go ahead and get us started with tonight's programming. We are doing a session today that is the first of a 4-part series that's meant to really help people explain or explore running for office. And this first one is called Why You and Why Now? And we're going to focus in both on making the case that this is the best time for an independent to run for office, but also we're going to help you to explore that why question and the why you part of this, because the core of every good campaign is storytelling, and the most important story is the story about yourself and what drove you to run for office. So we're going to cover understanding key motivations for deciding to run for office. We're going to cover identifying personal and community-focused reasons that you can share. We're going to talk about how to develop and refine all of that into a really powerful narrative that will resonate with voters. And we'll also talk to you about how goodparty.org's AI tools in our community can help you to run and ultimately win. Really, the goal here is to provide you with the tools and the insights that you need to move forward with whatever the next steps are confidently. And I see a comment from Stephen here that says it's hard to get on the ballot. And I totally get that. And we're going to do everything that we can to help make it easier to navigate the difficulties of getting it onto the ballot. And for an independent, sometimes it can be even harder. It takes more signatures, or sometimes it takes more money. There are structural barriers to get on the ballot. But we have seen in the last year alone, over 17,000 candidates run for office at the state and local level. And part of why I'm really excited is that we've helped over 13,000 candidates win elections. So this is totally doable. You guys are in the right space, and I'm looking forward to getting into it. So without further ado, I want to introduce my colleague, our expert this evening, Derek Lane. Derek, can you come on mic and tell us a little bit about what you do here at goodparty.org, and share some of your bona fides for helping candidates make this important decision to run for office?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rob. Hi, everybody. I am Derek Lane. I am the Senior Campaign Success Manager over here at goodparty.org. My job on a day-to-day is to help candidates just like yourself have the tools, knowledge, skills they need to run for office, run competitive campaigns, and win in seats all across the country. I've been working on campaigns now for let's see, this is year 16 for me. I have worked on campaigns from local ordinances all the way up to presidential campaigns and everywhere in between. So I'm very excited to be here with all of you to talk about the very important decision and considerations you should have when you are deciding whether or not to throw your hat in the ring for public service.
Excellent. And I see a couple of questions about whether or not this is being recorded and if it'll be available for review. And the good news is it is. We always post the next day to our community, the goodparty.org community. So this is a good time. I'm going to ask one of our call producers to go ahead and drop the link for the community. There are also an audience that I want to say hello to who are watching us directly in the community. So thank you to those of you who are tuning in Circle. If you comment or ask questions in Circle, we do have someone monitoring who's going to read those off to me. So feel free to be active in Circle as well. I want to sort of dive right into the topic at hand, Derek, which is understanding the decision to run. For folks who are thinking about running for office, what do you think are the key factors that they need to consider in this early stage where they're feeling out whether or not they want to do this?
Yeah, I think there are really three fairly simple but consistent factors when you're deciding to run for office. I think understanding these categories, sort of where you fall along each of these various lines of consideration that we'll discuss, is really important to eventually building out your why statement, building the case for why you should be running for office. But the three sort of categories of consideration that I think everybody should be thinking about is quite simply capacity. Are the stars aligned in your personal life to have the time to run for office? What is your motivation for running? And what is your credibility to run? So I think it would be helpful for folks if we went through these sort of one at a time to discuss the various considerations that might fall under each category here. And let's see, Rob, do I have share screen here? I'll put a request through. I don't know about you guys, but having somebody just talk at me with nothing to look at is difficult over here. And so I'll help break it up a little bit. We will go over here. All right. Okay. Am I ready to run for office, right? So here are the three sort of areas of consideration, the things that you guys should be on the top of your mind as you are deciding whether or not to throw your hat into the ring. Capacity, like I said, that's fairly straightforward. Do you have the time to dedicate? Motivation, I think the sort of three key areas you need to ask yourself. Do you feel momentum from others? Or is this entirely a personal desire? Does this specific office I want to run for actually empower me to solve the problems that I care about or that my community cares about? And how do the needs of my community align with my own personal ambitions and goals for running for office? And when it comes to credibility, how have you done the legwork necessary to position yourself as a credible leader in the community? So we're gonna hop much deeper into these. I sort of have a rubric that I lay out for each one of these categories, with sort of green flags, yellow flags, and red flags. And I think it would be a helpful exercise for you guys to just sort of keep note of where your green flags are, where your yellow flags are, and where your red flags are in each one of these categories. Because I think it is. I will say none of these are a deal breaker, right? But I do think it will help you focus, especially when you're in the planning and decision making phase, where your strengths lie and where you might need to focus before you make any sort of announcement or start pulling papers or make any real moves to run for office.
I love the framework there. And I think for each of the folks who are following on at home, feel free to drop in the chat. I'd love to hear what you think some of your green flags are, whether it's in that capacity bucket or the motivation bucket, or if it's in the credibility bucket. And where do you think your red flags or even your beige flags, to borrow some terminology that I probably don't fully understand. And Derek, while folks are adding their green flags and red flags into the chat, once a candidate's gone through an exercise like this, how can they use the answer to this really important question of why are you running, right? How can they take those green flags and turn that into a story?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rob. Capacity, motivation, credibility isn't really just about deciding whether or not to run. Essentially, it's going to provide you with the raw material that you need to build out that why statement. For those of you who have run for office, and I see a few folks here in the chat have run for office a couple times. Some of you are brand new. Some of you are actually still in the decision-making phase. But if you have run a campaign or been around campaigns, the question you will get the most from voters is, why are you running? Right? It's the question you should seek to answer in every single conversation. Understanding where you are, how to start building that narrative, and how to build out that why is going to be the foundational piece for how you pitch yourself to voters, for how you build out the rest of your messaging, how you frame yourself narratively across the course of the campaign.
Excellent. And when you're thinking about putting together the elements of a really strong personal narrative, what kind of makes up the rubric for that? What goes in? What's the recipe for a really strong why statement?
Yeah, I think a good why statement should have some biography, and I don't mean your resume. We'll talk quite a bit about this, but how you identify, your bio. You're a parent, you're a teacher, you're a community activist, right? Your connection to the community, how what problem you see in the community that you would like addressed, and framing the solution to whatever that problem is that you outline. I, again, personally have a hard time visualizing this. I do have some examples. Before I move on here from these rubrics, I just want to make sure everybody's got a chance to see each one here before we move on. And again, like I said, with these rubrics, and this is very, very important because I've done this exercise with hundreds of candidates. I've seen a lot of people check off a few red flags and think that makes them, disqualified to run for office. The good news is fairly straightforward. You do not need to be perfect in any category. I have never seen a candidate who's green flags in every category. They're very rare. Most of them are running for federal and higher office. You probably know their names. You don't need to be perfect in every category. You do have to be honest with yourself, with the folks around you. We'll talk a little bit later about sort of kitchen cabinet and building out your support network. But no single red flags that disqualifier to run for office. At the end of the day, most of you want to run for office because you have a desire to make change in your community, and sometimes that isn't. All the rest of the pieces. Good Party, our community. We're here to help you guys sort of manage that. But at the end of the day, none of these by themselves are inherent disqualifiers. Okay, so I want to move right into a why statement. These are why statements that I think do a fairly good job of laying out the 4 key components of the why statement: the bio, your connection to the community, your problem statement, and framing the solution. So I've got a few different examples here. I will say, because I've got my screen share guys up, I won't be monitoring the chat as I go through this. So Rob or Danielle or Kenny, if somebody wants to just shout out if folks have relevant questions in line, I'd be happy to stop and answer them. But so I want to deconstruct this a little bit. Full why statement for a candidate running for school board. I wrote all these last night, guys, and so none of these are for real candidates. But my full why statement: I am running because I'm a parent who spent years navigating a school system that asks families to adapt instead of listening to them. I believe our schools work best when parents and educators are treated as partners. And right now that balances, right? So if we go through and we look at each single piece of this, right? The bio, I'm a parent, right? This establishes who the candidate is. It is connected to their lived experience, not their resume, and immediately signals, credibility on school board stuff, education related stuff, without sort of framing themselves as an expert, right? Most of us aren't experts in education policy. Okay. If we look at connection to the community, right? You are someone who has spent years navigating the school system. Again, what you have with this framing is, it expands the framing beyond just you as a candidate and sort of broadens it out to other families who could see themselves in that same situation, right? And it uses very plain, emotionally recognizable language that most people with children in school are going to be able to connect with. Problem statement, fairly straightforward. The school system asks families to adapt instead of listening to them. And that balance is missing. It's sort of a little bit of a two-parter. But it names a very specific dysfunction. It is not abstract, and it is framed from the candidate's own personal point of view, right, and their own personal lived experience. And framing the solution here, I believe our schools work best when parents and educators are treated as partners. Okay, which eventually will connect back to the vision. We'll talk about that a little bit later, how your why statement connects to your vision. But this right here is a fairly basic why statement that I've seen various permutations of for candidates running for school board. I do want to hop back in here. Go to the chat. Okay. Next example I want to look at is maybe focused on folks that might be more in sort of where you guys are. First-time candidates, maybe somebody who comes to the decision to run for office because they have a community service background, a volunteering background, an organizing background, but somebody who's generally involved in the community but isn't political. So this one, the bio, unlike the first one, this is I'm a parent. You'll see this one is a little bit less clear, less direct, right? This one, I'm going to say, is a little bit more subtle than just I'm a parent. This person is a volunteer organizer, someone who shows up, right? That is the bio that they are putting forward. The community connection, I've tried for years by volunteering and showing up. Problem statement, there are limits to what you can change without a seat at the table. And the framing the solution is, I believe our schools work best when our parents and educators are treated as partners. So even if you don't have a direct, phrase to connect yourself to for bio, there are ways to talk about your lived experience that can sort of show those bona fides without having to go directly into your resume, which is, you guys are going to hear me talk about like not connecting it to your resume. There is a time and a place for that. But when you're talking about your motivations for running and what's going to resonate with people emotionally, it's going to be connecting with them on values and not like statistics and policy.
I love that last example there. I think that it does a really good job of showing a very identifiable emotion, which is frustration. It says, for years I've tried volunteering and showing up, but there's limits to what you can change without a seat at the table. And there's something so authentic about that and also vulnerable about that. And I think that that's that sort of vulnerability, that willingness to share what frustrates you or what motivates you is so important in these. But I'll let you get back to the third example.
Yeah, and I will say this. I mean, a lot of these why statements, like Rob said, they're going to connect to an emotion, right? Frustration, hope, anxiety, fear, right? These are the things that drive people to take action, is specifically to vote. They're some of the biggest motivators to actually go out to the polls, is wanting to see change in your community or sort of being a little anxious about the change you are seeing in your community, right? And so your ability to tap into those emotions, a lot of these why statements are just that. They are emotional statements, and we're here to help you sort of build those out. Last one here, example 3, accountability and transparency. This, again, sort of has a more of a subtle bio piece. For this one, it doesn't ever state directly who they are, but they are an observer. They're a participant, right? But I'm running because too many decisions are made without the people they affect ever having a voice. I believe local government should be transparent, accessible, accountable, people powered, anti corruption. And right now, it feels closed off to too many residents, right? So the same thing, this is tapping into that feeling of voicelessness, this feeling of frustration that the government isn't representing you the way you want. It's not driving the outcomes you'd like to see in your community. But all of these are examples of how you should build out a why statement. If you notice about all of these, they are short, right? These are something that ideally you can say to somebody in less than 10 seconds and they can walk away regurgitating it to you, right? Being able to repeat it and echo it right back to you. That is the ideal outcome for any of these why statements, is that somebody walks away from hearing it with a very strong sense of what your values are, what your concerns are, and what your solutions are.
Awesome. So Derek, I think that, I began to talk a little bit about authenticity, and I want you to talk a little bit more about the importance of authenticity when it comes to talking to voters. I think that one thing that almost everyone on this call has probably said before is like, I just don't believe this person about somebody running for office. And a lot of folks can make that gut decision of, oh, this guy's a phony, or on the flip side, like, oh, this person's real. Like, I do believe them. What is the role of authenticity, and how can our potential candidates who are listening tonight really make sure that their why statements ring as true?
Yeah, I'll say a couple things. I mean, first off, authenticity is fairly high on the list in terms of importance to voters, right? And therefore should be very important to anybody who is looking to dip their toe into public service, right? Everybody here, I assume, is here because they want to make changes in their community, and the way you do that, guys, is by winning hearts and minds, and you win hearts and minds by being authentic. Voters have an incredibly high-tuned BS detector, right? They absolutely do. Like Rob said, if you've ever had a politician do that like double speak thing to you, it doesn't feel good for you. I've known candidates who do that, and I can also say it doesn't feel good to them. And at the end of the day, if you aren't authentic, you're not going to sound confident in what you say. You're not going to be seen as a credible candidate. And honestly, you set yourself up for all of these little gotcha moments, right? Or these situations where others can control your narrative because you aren't being honest and authentic with yourself and your voters. And so I think at the end of the day, it's very important to understand that a why statement is not your interpretation of what you think voters want to hear, right? It is a genuine reflection of who you are as a leader and who you are as a community member, right? And as a candidate. So I think it's very, very important. You shouldn't lie to voters. I mean, that's one thing. I used to run canvassings for a long time. Like, it's much better to say I don't know than to feed a voter something that they want to hear just because it gets you out of the conversation. So for me, authenticity is the most consistent factor amongst all of the candidates I work with.
Well, thank you for that, Derek. I think the why statement and the sort of background about why you want to run for office is half of the picture. The other half is, what do you want to do for the community, or where do you want to take them? So can you talk about how this why statement can be a building block, and how you kind of go from there to communicating a campaign vision or a message that points back to that why, while also sort of building out, the promise essentially that you're making to voters?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think, from here on out, once you have your why statement, essentially everything should grow out of that why statement, right? This statement of values, right? It's an anchor for your entire messaging program, right? So if your why is explaining like what pulled you into this race, what prompted you to decide to become a candidate, your vision explains where you're trying to go, right? For all intents and purposes, it's sort of an expansion of your, framing the solution. But again, sort of based in that emotional reality and with emotional triggers designed to, show a potentially hopeful future or solution or what the community could look like once you're in leadership and you have solved the problem that you're trying to solve. So I think just to go back to one of our examples here, right? Going for a first-time candidate, community service background, you can see here, right, that the vision is an extension of that why statement, and it can be directly connected back through every single piece of it, right? If your why statement is, I've learned that there are limits to what you can do without a seat at the table. We know that the problem statement is that people feel excluded from the system. Certainly, this candidate who's running does. Right. Your vision is then a community where people care, speak up, and show up, aren't stuck on the sidelines. That they have a real access to decision makers, and where good ideas don't die just because they come from outside of City Hall. Right. And so the vision is where you want to go. The why is why you decided to get in the race. And so you're going to find as we go through, further trainings where we're talking about how do you build out your messaging program and your talking points and your issue statements and things like that. All of those are going to be born out of this why statement and the accompanying vision for your campaign and for your team.
Excellent. So, all right. So we've seen the way that a why statement grows into this clear vision for the future. But as you know really well, Derek, campaigns don't happen just in theory. They tend to play out in conversation, right? They are playing out in conversation at the doors or at events or online and with people who are worried about real things, the stuff that they feel, in their pocketbook, so to speak. So the next question is, how do you use this story, the why and the vision, to respond to what voters are actually concerned about? Maybe an example, a voter at the doors, or or how do you turn all of this into something that's a conversational tool and not just a blurb that you put on your website?
Yeah, that's a very, very, very important question. Like you said, most of your conversation, most of your campaign is not going to play out online. It's not going to play out theoretically or hypothetically. It's going to happen in these face-to-face interactions with you as a candidate, with your supporters, with the folks that are out there messaging for you. And they're going to come in the form of frustrations. They're going to come in the form of stories. They're going to come in explanations of folks' lived experiences. And one of the biggest mistakes I see candidates make when they sort of first get into a race or they're first getting involved in politics is answering every voter concern with a solution or a statistic, right? At the end of the day, the most important thing you can do as a candidate is understand what a voter's concern is, being able to restate that concern and then reconnect it back to your why and your vision. And so, let's say you knock on somebody's door. I hope you all are going to plan to knock on some doors this campaign season. But let's say you're this community service minded candidate, right? Who keeps showing up to City Hall and nothing gets done. So you knock on their door and they say, look, I've gone to meetings, I've spoken up, nothing ever changed, right? That is not a request for you to then tell them all of the reforms you want to make at City Hall, right? What we aren't going to say is, once I get elected, I plan to introduce these reforms to improve civic engagement. That answer inherently skips over the emotion that this voter was trying to express, right? And so the sort of, I don't quite call it a formula, but I do go through a little process. But you want to listen, you want to empathize, you want to acknowledge their concern, you want to redress it, and you want to go on to the sort of next piece of your script. But anytime a voter expresses a concern, the first response should almost always be, "I hear that. right? And honestly, that's exactly why I'm running. Uh, so for years, I've tried to solve problems from the outside too, volunteering, organizing, showing up, and I kept hitting that same wall. What I've learned is that without a seat at the table, good ideas don't get taken seriously. My goal is to change that, to make sure that people who do care and do show up aren't locked out of the process anymore, right? So they said, I'm frustrated. I keep showing up, nothing's happening. And I was able to use functionally this why statement and this vision to address their concern, let them know I hear them, I understand where they're coming from, and that I share that same frustration. And I'm able to connect to that voter on a much deeper level than you can sometimes when you just show up at a door and you start asking survey questions to strangers. So the other thing too, in that response, nobody's over promising, nobody's arguing, and ultimately the answer stayed well within that why, within that vision. And so the ability to pivot, I think, quickly on those and being able to pull it back into your why, that's a separate skill that can probably get its whole own training on how to message pivot back to your why statement. But the more you do it, the more you talk to folks, the more you get out in your community and engage with voters, the quicker you're going to be at that, the more natural it's going to come, and the more confident you're going to sound as you get out there and you start repeating.
Derek, you and I have done a lot of training on things like debate prep and public speaking prep in the past. And one of the things that I know you're really good at is training candidates on how to pivot back to the sort of question that they wish that they had been asked, or pivot back to their strongest talking points. And I think oftentimes the why statement kind of makes up the heart of those pivots. And it just strikes me that some of these interactions at the door, where someone, um, comes at you with a major concern or maybe even a disagreement, that there's an opportunity to do what you said here and make them feel heard, but then also kind of land back on what you can assume that you agree on in your why statement. Do you have any examples? This is a little bit of a curveball question, but do you have any examples of how you might use your why in a contentious interaction with a voter to be able to really have a positive interaction that maybe was headed sideways?
Yeah, so I sort of have a back pocket phrase that I use is I understand what I'm hearing in the community is, and then go right back into the why statement. And so again, the same thing. You want to always acknowledge the voter's concern, even if they disagree with you. And you can acknowledge their concern, by the way, without maybe validating or hyping up what their answer is. If it is opposed to what your viewpoint is, again, you want to remain authentic. Your morals and values shouldn't change depend on who you're talking to. But once you acknowledge that concern, again, what I'm hearing in the community is that a lot of people are feeling shut out from the process, which is why I've decided to run. I've been going to City Hall for years and years and years, and I share that frustration. And so, yeah, I think as long as you're pivoting back to your addressing their concern, which is again the most important thing, and switching it back to the things you're hearing and that your lived experience, your authentic lived experience, and you're pulling it back to your why, your values. These conversations, even with people you disagree with, become infinitely easier and less anxiety inducing, I think, for a lot of folks. So.
Well, when you are crafting this why statement, I think it's one of the very first things that a candidate should do, right? Because the first thing that happens when you tell people in your life that you are going to run for office is they are probably going to ask you why, which kind of brings up the question, who are the very first people that you should bring up the idea of running for office with if you're considering it?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, your personal stakeholders, right? This is your family, your spouse. One, if your spouse is on board, a campaign's very difficult. Okay, your spouse, your children, your closest friends, sort of your most inner network. your community truth tellers, your other community activists, folks who might be, fellow grassroots folks, political practitioners, the folks who are elected officials, or have run for office before. Maybe they are campaign professionals, like the folks over here at goodparty.org, but folks in the know about how campaigns work, and potential validators, people who might endorse you down the road. I would call these more like grass tops instead of grassroots, but they might be the leaders of advocacy organizations or community organizations, and things like that. So those are, I would say, like the four big categories of folks you should talk to when you're first deciding you should run. But absolutely, first and foremost is going to be that most inner circle.
Awesome. So to reiterate, they're the personal stakeholders, the folks who are closest to you, who their lives are going to be impacted by you running. Like, you can't run for office without your family sort of having their shoulder behind it. You go to your community truth tellers, the folks who ideally are going to help amplify your campaign and sort of validate your efforts. And also political practitioners, the folks who you need to help run your campaign and staff your campaign. When is sort of the best time for these conversations to be taking place?
Yeah, I mean, before filing deadlines feel urgent, I think is a fairly easy mark. When there's still room to adjust the direction of your campaign or what office you want to run for. And certainly before you make any public announcements. I don't know if anybody saw relatively recently, I saw a video of a candidate who was announcing her run for mayor this year. Well, it turns out that the mayor is not up for 2 more years. So she made a big public announcement about running for mayor this year. Embarrassed herself a little bit. She's running for city council. That's awesome. But before you make any public announcements, you should certainly have a conversation with those around you. But my real answer, honestly, at the end of the day, the moment you start thinking that, hey, I might want to run for office, is the moment you should start talking to other people about it. Campaigns are long. It takes there's an awfully big on ramp sometimes, depending on what level of office you're running for. And the sooner you engage people, and the sooner they have buy-in to the campaign, the easier it's going to be come May, June, July, August, November, when it's time to get out the vote. So as soon as possible. There's rarely a time that's too early to start talking to your loved ones if you're deciding to take on such a big.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up filing deadlines. I'm going to share my screen here for just a moment because I want to make folks aware of a tool that we have at goodparty.org that I think can be really useful. So we have a page up called goodparty.org/elections where you can enter where you live. I have pre-populated in here. I'm in Cumberland, Maine, and Windham. And it will actually bring up the different offices that you might be able to run for. So in this case, there's a election for city council. The next one's in 2027. So if I wanted to prepare over the course of 2026 for running for this office, it has all the information from, okay, this is a 3-year term. In order to file for this, I need to submit my paperwork to the town's clerk's office. And good news for me, there's not a monetary fee for qualifying, but I do need to submit my paperwork with a petition signature requirement of 25 signatures. And it has the filing phone number. So if I were interested in running for office for school board in Windham, I would call this number and just make sure that everything on this page is accurate. And this will put me on the path to knowing when all of those really important dates are. So I'm going to make sure that we drop a link to this page. I think it's really useful for anyone who's in the earliest stages of figuring out if they want to run for office. And Derek, as folks are taking a look at that, what does a candidate need to hear from their kitchen cabinet, from these validators, to know, what, I'm going to move forward with this. I should submit those signatures. I should file. I should, invest in kicking off a campaign team.
Yeah. First, I guess I'll just define kitchen cabinet. I think it's a term we use an awful lot over here in campaign land. For folks of you who don't spend every day thinking about vote counts, might not be so obvious what it is, but essentially it's the inner circle of your campaign. If a president has a cabinet, the folks that lead each department of the government, these are the folks that are going to be most helpful. They usually take on roles within the campaign. This could be your treasurer, your most effective or most plugged in volunteers. A lot of your all kinds of people might fit into this inner circle. But I'll refer to that inner circle, your most trusted group of advisors as your kitchen cabinet. And really the things you need to hear from them is where you're strong and where you're not, or you're not yet credible. I'll frame it that way. How you are currently perceived, right? Not just how you intend to be perceived. I think that's also an important conversation. What will be the hardest thing, for you as a candidate, what their interpretation of what's going to be hardest about you as a candidate, whether or not they will actively help, or whether or not they are sort of serving in a cheerleader role, which is also a very important role, folks who can help amplify the message. But at the end of the day, I mean, a good kitchen cabinet, the best kitchen cabinets don't exist to protect your feelings, right? They exist to protect your future, right? And the future of the campaign and so I think for what you want to hear from them, ideally, is someone within that inner circle saying, hey, we'll make it work, whatever it takes, right? That is a very big flashing go signal that you're going to have the type of support you need in running an effective campaign.
Excellent. So I see a question here in the chat from Benita Jackson that says, I'm interested in running campaigns. Any resources for us? And this is a perfect segue into what I wanted to ask Derek next, which is, we at goodparty.org really pride ourselves on being able to offer the tools as well as the community in trainings like this that candidates and independents need to be able to run for office and win. Derek, what are some of the tools that you think are most powerful at this beginning stage of a campaign, especially for shaping your why statement and crafting the early messaging that a campaign needs to be successful?
Yeah, there's a couple of really powerful tools, the Good Party Toolbox, that I will sort of bring your attention to. One is the AI Campaign Assistant. This is let's see here, probably even share my screen so you guys can see what I'm talking about here. Here we go. To my dash. Okay, sharing screen. All right, so if you come into your dashboard, like I said, I think the most powerful writing tool or tool that we have to help you in this stage of the campaign is going to be some of the writing tools. The AI assistant in particular. If I can get it to load, here we go. So what I will say is I already have, I'm going to jump around a little why statement I had written out about my campaign. If you're in your profile, guys, who I'm running against was my past experience here. I'm going to say, here is my personal professional experience. Build me an emotionally driven why I'm running statement. Okay. Now this is really good if you are looking to absolutely just have it write your why statement for you. This will do a good job. It'll use the information you provide it to, find the words. What I actually recommend, guys, is to come to this with a why statement. To spend some time with some pen and paper or Google Doc or whatever, copy and paste and say, here is my why statement. Please help me refine it, right? So here we go. As a dedicated political advisor, proud parent of 4, I've seen firsthand the struggles our community faces. Our transportation system's limited, hindering access to opportunities. Our schools are underfunded, affecting the quality of education. Derek, I'm running for Maine House of Representatives, District 76, because I believe and a better future for our community. And then some stuff on the platform. Now, again, I want to say here, you can interact with it like a conversation, I think is very helpful. I want to say, let's remove anything to do with, my platform and focus on my motivations. All right, and that's going to take that command. It's going to adjust the prompt here. Okay, and it's going to spit out, I'm going to say something that's going to, on a rough draft in 5 seconds, get me something that's 85% of the way towards a completed Y statement. Okay. The other cool thing about the AI Campaign Manager we can do here is, great. Let's format this as a press release, right? And this is going to then take that Y statement and it is going to format it into a press release format. Right? If we wanted to turn this into a Facebook post, it would take that and put it in a format that's appropriate for Facebook. So it takes a lot of the guesswork out of the sort of format requirements for all the different use cases that you might be using these Y statements or your visions or your talking points or anything like that. But it's a very, very powerful tool to for a lot of people. For me, particularly as a writer, the AI assistant helps me articulate what I'm trying to say. I'm not a guy who's been reading grammar books, I'll tell you that. So this is really helpful for me to articulate some of the things that I'm trying to get across. You can also go in here on the left-hand side to the content builder. And here you will find, if you're looking to generate specific types of written content based on your Y statement or any of the information that you've fed into your profile, you can come in here and with just a few clicks generate some written content. So let's say a launch speech. We go here, and this is going to generate a launch speech. It's going to take about 30 seconds here to come through and generate. Maybe it's going to slow boat it today, Rob. I don't know. I'll get on a demo. It's a little slow. But here we go. Oh, where'd it go? Launch speech 2. Here we are. All right. And this is going to take my Y statement and it's going to convert it into the sort of building blocks for, an announcement speech. So all kinds of different tools, different templates, different resources that exist within your goodparty.org dashboard. But for all intents and purposes, I think the most helpful tool for this particular exercise of building out your Y statement and your vision, the AI assistant is an incredible tool for that. And we've on the back end, we've trained the AI assistant on, I don't know how many combined years of campaign experience we have over here on the Good Party team, but we've fed it lots of information and best practices on how to build these really, really, really effective programs.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you, Derek. We have a couple of other things that I want to point folks' attention to by way of resources. And as I do this, I want to invite people, please ask questions that you have. We're going to get into the Q&A portion to wrap up the call. And Derek and I usually do about 15 minutes or so of Q&A. So fill in with questions as they come to you. But I also think that the community is a really tremendous resource for folks who are looking to explore this early part of running for office. The exercise of crafting a Y is one of the things that we walk through as a part of our run course. We also have specific courses that help you decide what office is best suited for you. We have a whole session on how to write a campaign plan. We have a session on getting ballot access, and we have a course on how to launch your campaign officially and publicly. And then because it's been asked so many times, we did a deep dive sort of masterclass course on how to run a petition drive. So joining the community is the very best way to get access to all of this material. And the courses themselves go into pretty great detail and have exercises that will help you to do each of these things with great depth. So we have, very similar to Derek's presentation on the formula, a specific formula for what a strong winning why statement looks like. And we have exercises to help you walk through that, as well as additional resources and prompts that you can give the AI tools to get the very most out of them and get the best output out of them. So another just strong suggestion to join the community. There's close to 5,000 candidates who are active in that community right now, and we're excited to see it continue to grow. And yeah, so if you're watching in Circle, feel free to start submitting your questions via the chat. We'll have those pushed to us here. I'm going to try to get into some of the questions that I see in the chat here, starting with this is more of a comment than a question from Wes Sawyer. Wes points out to anyone in Colorado who wants to run for office, you could explore running with the Forward Party, which is closely aligned with goodparty.org. And it's a good way to get candidate leverage to be able to access the ballot. We love working with nonpartisan and third-party candidates here at goodparty.org. Derek, this feels like a good time to bring up what the sort of the user agreement at goodparty.org is. It's a question that we get asked a lot. You know, who do we work with? Who do we not work with? Can you talk a little bit about the user agreement?
Yeah, sure. So in order to be here on the goodparty.org program, for one, you can't be a partisan candidate for one of the major two parties, right? That means if you are an independent, you are running in a nonpartisan race, or you are a third-party candidate, great. Those are the types of candidates we support. We're also looking to support candidates who uphold our sort of core tenets, our core pillars of our pledge of being transparent and people-powered, civil and anti-corruption, right? So if that sounds like you, then you are in the right place. But yeah, if you're a Democrat or Republican running in a partisan race, those are not the types of candidates. But Forward Party guys, all the time. We love you guys.
Derek, I'm curious, are there any candidates that you can think of who had particularly strong why statements that you think of as a like gold star example of the why done right?
I do. The one that immediately comes to mind is a gentleman I worked with last year named Omari Ferguson. He won a city council seat out in California. And his why statement was actually very similar to the sort of school board candidate example that I gave about he kept showing up to City Hall. He was very active, but felt like none of the initiatives that he was trying to pass as a sort of citizen leader were making it through City Hall and being actioned. And so he ran, I mean, primarily on that frustration as his problem statement, and his vision being, you know, a community where our leaders are, I'm going to say, proactively transparent, meaning that he likes that he does a lot of outreach to his community about his decision-making process. And it was a race that, for all intents and purposes, on paper, he should not have run. He was running against a very long-term incumbent, very well-liked incumbent. And he was able to put together a very compelling narrative on, you know, the need for a new generation of more, again, like proactively transparent leadership. And he won that race against an incumbent like 70-30. It was a blowout. So I think, again, the more you can connect your why statement towards your own personal truth and your own sort of personal set of values, or even your own personal set of frustrations with what's happening in your community, the more likely it is to resonate with other people. The more likely it is that you will win votes and win your election come election day. So, yeah, I mean, the best ones are authentic. I mean, that if anybody's ever spoke to Amara, like he's a straight shooter. It came off in every aspect of his campaign. And this was one of the very first exercises we did together was writing up that why statement and figuring out how to articulate that.
Question from Dan here. Isn't it true that town council and school board seats aren't party identified? And in some cases, Dan, that's the case. Yeah. There are a number of nonpartisan town council or nonpartisan school board elections. Now, this doesn't always mean that those elections play out in a nonpartisan fashion. Oftentimes, you'll still see the Democratic Party or the Republican Party weigh in and endorse candidates and even assign them campaign managers and use this as almost a farm league to then move people up their sort of leadership apparatus. And, we have seen many cases where we've had nonpartisan candidates running in nonpartisan races, but still against a candidate who receives significant funding from one of the two major parties.
Yeah, and it also changes jurisdiction to jurisdiction. I mean, there are some states where almost all their city councils are partisan. Most states, the local legislative level is nonpartisan. But we're seeing more and more places are moving away from a nonpartisan model, especially in school board races. There's been a lot of traction over the last 5 or 6 years to make those races partisan. And equally, a lot of pushback from I worked with a lot of candidates last year who were in what had been nonpartisan school board races that became partisan, and they decided that they were going to run as independents because they don't believe school boards are partisan legislative bodies. So, yeah, Dan, it just really depends on where you are and what you're running for. It's different in every state.
Yeah, but we have a couple more questions that I want to get to, but before I do, I want to be able to make the case one more time for kind of on the back of that comment, why I think it's the best time for folks to run for office. Number one, there are so many local offices that are coming up for election in 2026. Across the United States, there are over 500,000 local and state offices that are electable. And we have found time after time that when you look into these races, as many as 70% of them are races where it is an incumbent and they're running unopposed. So there's a large likelihood that if you are running for office at this state or local level, you'll be challenging someone who is going to win by default, and you get to go into that head-to-head race as an independent. Also, a lot of these state and local races, these to your point, Dan, these town council or school board seats, there are multiple winners. It's the top two, it's the top three who advance. So there's a real opportunity to be able to win. And in case folks missed it at the beginning of this call, so far, using this strategy of recruiting people into state and local offices, we've helped to elect over 13,000 people, with close to 10,000 of them being elected just last year. So a really exciting time. We've been seeing this movement grow over the last several years. And Derek, before I get into more of the questions, what do you think? If you had someone who was on this call kind of on the fence about running for office, what would you tell them?
I would say at this stage in American politics, and with the opportunity that exists right now for the independent, all kinds of articles come out recently about the growing independent movement amongst the sort of bottom age bracket of voters right now. That if you are passionate about making a difference in your community and you have the capacity and you've got the motivation, even if you don't have all the credibility, that I lean towards the side of doing it. At the end of the day, it is an experience. It will teach you a lot about your community, whether you win or you lose. And maybe 5 years ago, independent candidate, I would say you need to check off so many boxes in order to run. But like Rob said, we've helped over 10,000, 17,000 candidates at this point, right? So there's a lot. We have a lot of candidates, guys, get across the finish line everywhere, running on very similar messages of transparency and anti-corruption and sort of anti-partisanship, right? And so I think if you are considering it, then I would, again, start having those conversations with those who are closest to you. Start looking into what it's going to take, like logistically on the admin side. What is it going to take to get on the ballot? Who do I have to talk to? What piece of paperwork do I have to fill out? And start doing the planning. There's no harm that comes from doing the legwork to execute that decision if you do come to it. But start having those conversations and start sort of tracking mentally what those reactions are. And at the end of the day, if you're here, you're in the right spot. You should probably be running for office.
Yeah. A couple more questions. First, a question from Instagram. Is it possible to win as an independent in places like Texas? If we know nothing about how to be helpful, what would be some first steps? And I'll start by saying, yes, absolutely. We have elected many candidates in Texas, or been a part of many winning campaigns in Texas. I think, Derek, you even had a handful of early candidates last year who had March and May elections in Texas. But for someone who's really starting out, no experience at all, any advice for that person on first steps, and also any specific highlights that you know of coming out of Texas last year?
Yeah, a specific highlight. I worked with a woman named Teresa out in Willow Park, Texas, who was running for mayor. She was running against a 30-year incumbent. Sort of a good old boy network that existed in that part of the community. And we were able to, again, her why for running was just that what seemed to be a relatively big breakdown in the infrastructure development in her growing community. We focused on that frustration. We focused on how much people were spending to repair their cars. And again, she beat a 30-year incumbent, 75-25, and is now making very, very big strides in her community for the institution of home rule. Those of you out in Texas know all about all the home rule charters and stuff like that. That was sort of the crux of her campaign. So shout out to Teresa, Mayor of Willow Park. Proud to have worked on our campaign. If you were trying to figure out how do I get involved, where do I start? If I'm someone who's never really been involved in the political process, I'm not sure whether or not I want to run for office, but I do want to get involved in this movement. Honestly, I think the best place to go to figure out how you can be the most helpful is like places like the Good Party community, where you are going to have the opportunity to have conversations with candidates from across the country and sort of interface with them and figure out what are the needs that exist out there. What skill sets do I have to bring to the table to help, maybe alleviate some of these problems for some of these candidates? And how can I get involved as a volunteer or as a candidate or as someone who can be a leader on a campaign? So I'm not exactly sure where the point of view is coming for on where you want to get involved, but again, I think the Good Party community, that huge cachet of candidates that are always looking for help, is a good place to start. But I guess even more fundamental, if you want to help and get involved in politics, just tell somebody you want to help. I promise somebody will reach out and take advantage
of that. Yeah. And we'll help you in Texas. We'll help you in New York City. We'll help you in Bangor, Maine. We're like Johnny Cash. We'll go everywhere. Reza says, for a candidate who doesn't have connections or deep pockets or existing large community, does goodparty.org help with recruiting volunteers or fundraising? And this is a great question. You're probably like most of the candidates that we work with, and that you're not super well connected and you don't have deep pockets. We believe that you shouldn't have to be rich to run for office. What you should be is the best person for the job. We, in our community, make it really easy to find the other candidates and the volunteers, the people who are near you. I think one of the videos I share the most is a video that shows people exactly how to do that and how to search through the membership directory to find people who are near you so you can help to self-organize. When it comes to fundraising, our organization doesn't do a lot by way of direct fundraising. Instead, we offer a number of free tools, and we try to drive down the cost of running for office by making tools that you need to win available to you for free or as close to free as we can. For example, the voter file with all of the things like turnout scores and the likelihood that a voter is going to support something, that is one of the most expensive things that a candidate will spend over the course of a campaign. And we make that available to candidates who promise to be independent, people-powered, and anti-corruption for just $10 a month. It's the only thing that we charge for, and we'd give it away for free if we could. But the FEC requires us to charge something. And our community is built around the idea that the more that we kind of problem solve together, share resources, ask questions, the better it is for the community and the movement as a whole. So we actually have a leaderboard in our community that is built to be able to give away free perks to our candidates. So if you post a question that gets a bunch of likes, if you complete a bunch of courses, if you attend events, you can earn points. And then those points are things that you can cash in for free text messages. You can get strategy calls with members of our staff. You can even get free robocalls or a spotlight on our socials. So while we don't do a lot of direct fundraising, we do as much as we can to help our candidates, especially the candidates who are doing the work to help themselves. Another question I see here, do you have campaign experts who can show up as a featured speaker in local events sponsored by civic organizations? Wes, I am always happy to talk and spread the good news about independence winning. So my email is super easy to remember. It's just rob@goodparty.org. You can also DM me in our community. I'm happy to hear out any opportunities that give us the ability to help more candidates. So feel free to shoot me a direct message on that note. Linda, I see your comment here. Linda ran for county commissioner 12 years ago and secured triple the number of signatures required to run as an independent, and the local board of elections disqualified almost all of those signatures, even though those from the state's attorney, as they did not match exactly the voter record. And she says to be careful, which is great advice. Validating your signatures as you go and making sure that you're following the rules to the absolute letter is important. I have seen so many independents, especially, run for office and have their signatures challenged. Always collect more than what's required, but doing validation yourself, checking against the voter file during the signature drive. It's one of the most important reasons to have the voter file. So Sid asks, how is it that you can provide phone numbers of voters that we cannot obtain? Well, the voter file is public record, and there are specific uses that you're allowed to use it for. And that is, we get the voter file and are able to provide it to campaigns that have a EIN number, an official EIN number. So if you have an actual campaign, they'll be with the documentation to be held liable for any misuse of the data. That's how we're able to do that. Checking here, one more question from Reza. Any suggestions on how to do fundraising other than having a donation page on the candidate site? Any our professional fundraiser is a good way to go. This is another area that I can point back to the community. I wrote all of my best ideas on fundraising into a course. So we actually have a course called How to Fundraise that is available to the folks in the community. And I would say, as with most things, start small. Think of the people who are closest to you that might be on your campaign. An underrated tactic that I think that people should do when they are launching a campaign is just to pick up their phone, film a very straight to camera. It doesn't have to be perfect, almost like you're doing an Instagram story video where you say, guys, I'm finally doing it. I'm running for office. It's something I've thought about doing for a really long time. And I need my community and I need my folks to support this. This will be the one time that I ask absolutely everyone for support, and whether it's $5 or it's maxing out the contribution limit at $500, whatever it actually is for your race. This is the time where I'm going to ask absolutely everybody. You can block my number after this if you don't want to hear from me. And then I would send that video to literally every single contact that I have in my phone. And that would be how I would start a fundraising effort. And then anyone who gives to your campaign off of that initial volley of fundraising, I would make sure to thank gratuitously. And then as you approach your next filing deadline, I'd go back to those people and ask them to increase what they gave. Because if they gave something, they believe in you. And you're able to then ask that person to double down on that belief and max out their contribution. Professional fundraisers can be useful, but any professional fundraiser worth their weight will come up with a plan that pays their own salary out of what they're able to fundraise. They have to justify being on staff. So they should raise what it costs for them to be on staff, and then also enough to pay for someone else to come on staff. I usually, if I'm vetting professional fundraisers, I'm asking them to be able to do that and to help me raise the funds that I need to hire a field hire, somebody who's going to drive voter contact. So I love this question, Reza. Your head's in the right space. You're asking smart questions. But those are the places I'd start. And if you want more thoughts on that, take a look at the How to Fundraise course. Last call for questions. I think we cleared the question queue. Oh, one more. Where can I collect signatures and how long is a signature good for? And this is a question coming to us from Circle. And again, this is one where I'll say we have a course on petition gathering that has some of my favorite tips around signature drives. I think an underrated one, if you live in a more rural area like me, is to literally go to the dump, because everyone who is going to the dump lives in that area and is likely registered to vote there. And it's a place where there's usually a line and you have a captive audience, but getting signatures anywhere where you know that someone is likely to live in the actual town that you are collecting signatures in, because oftentimes you need signatures from people who are registered in your district or in your town or in your state. So post office is great. DMVs are great. Town hall is great. Anywhere where you're going to get lots of people who you see over the course of a day. Farmers markets are really good. And then on the how long do signatures last for? That's different jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Here in Maine, you can usually collect signatures for a statewide petition or a statewide position, and they're good for 1 calendar year. So usually 365 days. And that's not true everywhere. Sometimes they expire much, much quicker. So you need to call your town office and you need to, or your Secretary of State, to get a really clear answer on that. But I see some other good suggestions on where to collect signatures in the chat here. Linda says the county fair. I see the post office again and railroad station. Derek, any thoughts or wisdom to impart on collecting signatures?
Yeah, I've got a lot of thoughts on this. The only thing I think I would add is if you are looking, especially to start doing voter outreach fairly early in the campaign. Again, I come from a Canvas background. My thoughts always drift back that way, but grabbing a list of the registered voters and going to their house and asking them to sign your petition is a pretty good way to know that you are getting signatures from registered voters, right? It's a very easy way to sort of self-validate as you go. And typically has fairly high rates of return if you are, employing most of the other Canvas best practices, which again could be a whole separate training in and of itself. But anywhere where people congregate, where they live in town and might be registered to vote, would be a good spot to gather petitions.
A question from Zachary: what should we do when running as an independent? And an organization approaches you to run with them, i.e. Moms for Liberty type organization. I think that a lot of organizations will approach you, and they're endorsing organizations, right? They're not necessarily organizations that want you to run with them as a recognized party, but they want to support your campaign. And I think you want to get as many endorsements as you can from groups that you believe in, and from groups that you'd be proud to sort of fly the endorsement of. So we will be doing a endorsements focused training later in the year. And we do have, again, some courses on endorsements, how to court them and how to make the most of them. But endorsements can be a really powerful tool for your campaign, especially if the organizations have membership. Right. So if they have people who they can communicate, send emails to on your behalf, or invite to help volunteer on your campaign. So I'd really look at, do your values match up with that organization or not? What does the endorsement actually mean? Do they expect something sort of quid pro quo from you if they endorse you, or are they endorsing you because they believe that your values are aligned and you are going to be a champion for their issues without getting into that sort of corruption space? So just think through whether or not it's an organization you want to work with, and make that decision for yourself. All right. Well, I think that we made it through all of the questions. I want to thank you guys for those. The Q&A is always my favorite part of these calls. I love being able to answer questions. Anytime that you have questions that come up as you guys are feeling out your decision to run for office, and you are navigating trying to get onto the ballot, I do want to flag that every other Monday, I run office hours where I'll hop on a call with anyone who wants to chat through the problems or the opportunities that they're facing on their campaign. I do these every other Monday with our candidates who are considering a run, and every other Monday with our candidates who are actively running. We call them office hours, and they're promoted on the events page of our Circle community. And this is a good time, again, just to say, if you are taking this seriously, if you want to explore this more seriously, you got to join our community. It's where all of these courses are, and it is where you have the ability to DM experts like Derek and myself and the rest of the goodparty.org team. We also are going to be running the second training in this series in 2 weeks on February 5th. And that session, I think, is going to be even more tactical than this one. We talked a lot about feelings and sort of the why statement, but we have a training in 2 weeks that we're going to really go through how to write a campaign plan, what should be in your campaign plan, and that event will be Thursday, February 5th. 6 p.m. East Coast time, and we're going to be joined by our political director, Jared Alper, for that one, someone who has written a lot of campaign plans in his time. So once you've made that decision to run, you've got to build a viable campaign path, that sets you up with the right number of voter contacts to make, and will teach you how to determine exactly how many votes you need to be able to win your campaign and build a plan to then go out and get those votes. So really excited for that. That's the second training in this 4-part series. And again, that is going to be on February 5th. And you can RSVP for that the same way you RSVP'd for this call, and you can join it in our Circle community as well. So on that note, guys, and one last question. I see somebody said, where can I find the replay? We'll post that in the community tomorrow. It usually takes us until about noon to get that up, but it'll be in the part of the community that says GPA Live Recordings. Derek, final thoughts before we send folks off?
If you're considering running for office, talk to your people, guys. Filing deadlines are coming up. You should be in office. If you think you should, you probably should. All right. That's my parting piece of advice here. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Awesome. Well, have a nice night, everybody, and we will see you in 2 weeks.